Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Raven. I'm joined today by Brian Buck. He is a friend of mine. We crossed paths professionally. What was it, Brian? At least 10, 12,
I think a dozen
10 years ago?
Yeah. About 2008.
Yeah. So before I tell the audience a little more about Brian, first off, welcome. Thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here, Mark. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, so Brian is, among other things, he's a transformational coach for small and medium-sized businesses. I thought this is an interesting phrase you use on your LinkedIn page. Brian describes himself as a success curator. Tell us, I'm curious, what that phrase means to you.
Yeah, I had this eureka moment a few years ago in my life. I love curating, and what curating actually translates in Latin is to care for. And what curating is, I like to go deep in things, find all sorts of things, and then I like to bring back, here's like the few nuggets that really rise above that's going to help people. So I curate in the way of wanting to help people. And I've been such a fan in the personal improvement world for many years, even before we met. And so I kind of picked up all of these little things, tips and tricks, and now I kind of bring it together and use it to be able to help people achieve things that they never thought were possible.
Wow, well, that's a great goal, and I know it feels good to help people in that way. So we'll talk more about the work Brian does as a coach, but I also want to mention that Brian has a YouTube show / podcast, or is it the other way around?
I just call it a show, and they can either see us or listen to us.
Yeah, it's a show called People, Purpose, and Profits Business Coaching. I've been on there with Brian's co-host, Catalina Park, and so it was really good to be on your show, and I'm glad we're going to have a conversation here as well.
Yeah, it's fun being interviewed by you this time.
Yeah. Which hat do I have on? It's an interviewer this time. I sometimes in the same day have both roles. But you can learn more about Brian and his work at his website, brianbuck.org. So Brian, I'm sure you've got a good story for us here. What would you say is your favorite mistake?
Yeah, my favorite mistake was actually probably one of the darkest moments of my life. And my mistake was when I was at a workplace and it turned toxic. And the mistake that I made was I waited too long to do anything about it. And a little bit of a story. So I still to this day do not know what the tipping point, but it was literally a night and day thing where I had a VP completely deny and do opposite of everything that this person has ever said in front of me before.
So that was the tipping point of when it got unbearably bad, you mean?
No, that's when it started.
Okay.
I like things are normal. I worked at this place for a long time. I loved the work that I was doing, and then all of a sudden this VP changed. Then when the VP changed, did some high pressure to make our director retire early, and then took a peer of mine and made them an interim director. And during that time, I had this interim director and this VP. They started really undermining absolutely everything. And one of the ways that I describe it is it was like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It was passive aggressive. It was little things. And this was my mistake. As part of it is I kept going, I'm an adult. This is a little thing. I'm not going to respond to this. I'm big. I can handle this. But then it kept going. And I would have other people in the organization come up to me and say, what's the matter? What's going on with you? I've been hearing from this interim director that you're failing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't know where this is. Like the fact that I had other people coming to me to kind of talk about these underhanded things.
Right, because that conversation hadn't come directly to you.
Right,
from the
right.
interim. Right.
Right. And then the VP would bring us into a room and we were going to kind of reorg after the director left. And my position was always on the parking lot. And I remember this VP saying, well, this is a safe place to talk. And all I could think of was not for anybody in this room besides you. And, to me, there was a huge lesson in, as a leader and as someone who coaches leaders, just because you say it's a safe place doesn't mean people actually feel safe.
Right.
And,
Right.
and anyways, it continued. And the interim director I started to see a pattern. And they would be really trying to destroy the reputation of anyone who disagreed with them or
Wow.
who crossed their path. And it got to the point where I'm someone, as being a success-minded person, I have trained myself to always look or choose perceptions that serve me. But I found in this toxic workplace, I couldn't do that. And my wife at one point said, Brian, you've lost your spark. Which
She
just,
could tell. Yeah.
right, she could tell who I was gone. Everything that I loved was gone. And so then I had to really figure out what to do. And I started to realize everything that I valued and the way that I interpreted the organization's values were not alive. And I started to hate where I worked. And I, for someone who teaches engagement, I've never experienced what it was like to be actively disengaged before that experience. So, and it just emotionally ate me up so badly, and it changed so much. And I eventually was luckily recruited to another place, and by then we got another VP who made a good offer to be able to stay and correct things. But by then I wanted nothing to do with the organization. I lost trust in the organization that would allow something like this to happen. There's a guy out of Portland, name is Galen Emanuel, who saved my life. He did a LinkedIn post that said, great employees fire shitty bosses. And that was the first time I realized I could actually do something. I had power when I felt powerless. And the reason why I call it my favorite mistake, because I learned so many lessons. I reached what I call as a never again moment in my life, or for anyone else, to never be there again. And so I really learned, one is how emotional conflict can be. And we all know once we get that amygdala, I know we pronounce it right, but
The amygdala.
The amygdala, right? Once that triggers, you're not thinking clearly.
Wait, no, I'm sorry. Sorry, Brian. Brian's a friend, so I'm going to point out. No, amygdala.
Amygdala. Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah, sorry.
That's it.
You made a mistake on a podcast about mistakes. I don't mean to beat you up for it.
No, it's all good.
The reptile brain kicked in. Go ahead.
Right. Yes. And then the other thing that I learned is, the world that I'm in has been about what's the root cause. I'm always wanting to understand why. And I was like, why was this person treating people so poorly from an objectable state? And that's when I really realized that hurting people hurt others. And, this person was going through a divorce at the time. This person often couldn't influence. They would have ideas that no one could ever grasp on to say, hey, let's give that a try. That makes sense. And so you start to see, here's someone who's hurt, who now has power that's kind of overcompensating to make up for that. And so it helped me have a lot more empathy for leaders, because it's very easy. Because I remember reading Bob Sutton's no asshole policy, thinking, but they aren't clearly being if it were an asshole, it'd be really easy to clear it up. But the passive aggressive and recognizing that they weren't necessarily doing it on purpose, but they were just reacting, gave me so much empathy and helping understand that. It also helped me to speak up early. I had a situation in the next role that I had where things are starting to be what's this about? And I was able to speak up clearly about what I wanted, besides just letting it ride, just going, I can handle it. And not allowing these negative things to stack, but address them early, which of course, the world of improvement, you want to deal with things when they're small.
Yeah. So earlier when you said, the mistake was waiting too long to do anything about it, quote unquote, doing anything about it doesn't just mean leaving the organization. It includes things like speaking up, trying to raise the issue, saying, here's what I want or need in a situation.
Right. And I did do that before I decided to go. I made sure I had an option to get out if it didn't go the way that I wanted.
So,
it really came down to when I had that crucial conversation. When they agreed, I didn't believe them. So at least I felt like I did the right thing before piecing out.
Yeah. How long, what was the timeline from that moment when you realized, oh gosh, things are now changing, to the point when you left? Was that a year? Was it less?
It was probably about
more?
9 months. Yeah,
9 months.
9 to 10 months. That felt like 5 years. The longest 9 months of my life.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I mean, sometimes things like this happen when there's a change in leadership, but this is a different change. The leader, the same person, was behaving differently.
Right.
And I'm sure that was confusing.
Right. And especially, from someone with like a scientific mindset, to not be able to find any logic behind it. To this day, I don't understand why. And I have to find my own closure with that. So
yeah, and I think a lot of situations where a leader is behaving a certain way, whether their behavior has changed or not, some of it, they may be responding to how their immediate boss, using the word, I don't like the word boss, but I guess it fits in some, their immediate, the leadership above them, maybe conditioning them, or stuff may be rolling downhill, as they say. But no, I was just going back when you said that leader told you this is a safe place to talk. Like, I don't know if this is wisdom or cynicism. Like, I get suspicious at a statement like that.
Sure, right.
Like, you could be demonstrating that. Like, why are you having to go out of your way? Like, I think a similar statement is, my door is always open. Like, well, is it?
Right.
If it was, and I felt welcome, I would know this. The other one, I learned this earlier in my career. If somebody ever even thinks to say in the context of the organization, I'm not a political person, look out. Because that is the person who is political, right? Somebody who's truly not into organizational politics doesn't even think to bring it up, right? But somebody who's trying to sort of, I don't know, lurk in the shadows or be a ninja about stuff, they're going to try to convince you that they're not into playing politics at work.
That reminds me of a Dimitri Martin joke who says, whenever someone starts a sentence with, I'm a taxpayer, they're going to be a jerk.
Well, so a quick detour here. Yeah, there are these different phrases like, "Hey Brian, let me be honest with you for a minute."
Right.
What's your reaction to that? Like, what? Yeah. I thought you were being honest with me, man. Come on.
Right. Yeah. Well, what about the rest of the hour? Are you gonna still be honest then?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Just for a minute, like honesty zone, and then we'll turn that off.
Well, and that was another huge learning that I had too, is there was no executive visibility of what was happening. And that was kind of once I left and was able to kind of piece things together, I got to a point where I blamed the organization for allowing it to happen, but then there was no visibility, and I think so many people believe this is something that happens elsewhere. It can't be here. But if they saw it, I think they would have reacted.
And it's tough, right? I mean, if you had some opportunity or mechanism, like, quote unquote, skip level meeting, if that was a regular thing, or like, somehow going above your boss's head is risky.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah. And you didn't, 2 levels already were a problem. Like you were saying, it was coming from above. Is it going to just be even worse? But I there is a point Like when I had that crucial conversation and I realized I couldn't trust that interim director, at least I made them play their hands so I can make an informed decision. So I think there is a piece on that. And like one of the things that I became obsessed with, learning for myself and practicing and helping other teams, is bringing up elephants in the room in a respectful way. Because then you can get rid of all assumptions and this is their choice and they're doing it consciously.
Do you have an example of that, or even if it's just kind of a scenario?
Yeah, well, when I was at another organization, when I really started to practice this, one of my personal beliefs about leadership is a leader will set outcomes and then the team creates the process to get the outcomes. That's a bit
Sure.
where this works. So I had a leadership team who said, this is your process and your outcome. The only feedback we want from you is how well this process is working for you. And I was able to say, well, here's an assumption that I have about leadership, and this is why this feels different than that. Can you help me understand your assumption? And it was able to make the leaders go, that wasn't our intent. And I was able to have other people come up to me going, I'm so glad you said something. Like I find when you bring up the elephant in the room, people are thankful, especially when you don't do it in a jerk way. And it was able to create a good conversation. But, if this person came back and said, no, you just do what I say, process and outcome, I might choose whether or not that's a place or someone I'd want to work with.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious, that phrase, when you talk about doing this in a non-jerk way, at one point when I was relatively new to working in healthcare, like there was this advice that was passed along, if you need to question someone, there's such hierarchy in healthcare. If you need to question a surgeon or somebody higher up in the hierarchy, one way of doing that is to use a phrase you did. Help me understand. Help me understand why we're doing it this way. Now, tone of voice, probably like anything, can be helpful or not. It's like the difference in, you don't want to come across like, well, bless your heart, as
right.
as they say in the South. Like, that sounds nice. Help me understand could sound nice or it could sound jerky, I guess. But is that a phrase you ran across at all?
The help me understand?
Help me understand.
Yeah, I probably picked up that in my coaching world, but specifically in the world of bringing out elephants in the room, it is about recognizing that we might be approaching something with different assumptions. And so it is really about, I assume this, what do you assume? Oh, that's different. What do we want to do with that? So I think that is the main point of it, whether or not you couch it with a help me understand, or that's probably just my ability to connect easier and not be, like I said, it's all about being constructive.
Sure.
And collaborative.
And being constructive in what? I'm sorry?
And collaborative. Like, this isn't me versus you. I'm right, you're wrong. Like, hey, I've got this assumption, you got this assumption. What does this mean?
Yeah.
If they're different, what do we want to do going forward?
Yeah, and being constructive, that seems to be key. Help me understand why you're being a jerk right now. That's not really going to lead to anything helpful.
Right. Well, and that's the other key thing that I learned is what's called as nonviolent communication. And that is recognizing this is what I observed without judgment. This is what I'm feeling. Communicating, understanding what I need, and then making a request. So often people harbor, and this is what I did in the toxic workplace until I figured this out, was I was just eating it up. I wasn't really clear what I was feeling. I wasn't clear what I needed, nor was I asking for what I needed. And if you have a relationship and someone says, here's what I need and here's my request, many people are more open to doing that if they genuinely care. If they don't care, that's also data for you as well. And then you aren't pointing fingers or blaming, but now you see there's a difference. Now what do I want to do with that?
And that whole approach that you described there, that applies in workplace relationships or personal relationships, right?
Yep, absolutely. And it's something that is, what I like about it is there's a process to it. So when you are in the emotion, you can kind of ride that and make it work. Versus I'm feeling this and now I'm just reacting. Because when you react, you might lose your spark like I did. Because you aren't doing it consciously. And this, at least, what I love too is that kind of brings that back into that success mindset that I've spent so much learning on, and it brings back that element of choosing how I want to go forward.
So there's one other phrase you mentioned, Brian. It matches up with the title of a book that I have heard about. It's been recommended to me so many times. I need to actually go read the book. A book called Crucial Conversations. So I don't know, are you influenced by that book, or are we just happening to use the phrase?
I used the phrase, and that was actually one of the other powerful lessons that I've learned was my interpretation of that book is it's awesome, but it's a big deal. There's like we're going to have this conversation. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And that doesn't work when someone just said something horrible in a meeting and you're walking out of the meeting. And so what I've learned was how to have these kinds of conversations quickly and within real time in a way that doesn't bring up the fight or flight that crucial conversations could actually do. And that to me has really been a game changer. It helped me have that conversation before I left in a way that helped us get there. And then I have taken it in the other places that I've worked, and the clients that have tried it have been very successful using it because you get to do it in real time.
And you talk about fight or flight instinct, it comes back to the amygdala again, that part of our brain that goes, it's that kind of autonomous reaction. And, I've heard this related to continuous improvement. Just as a quick aside, I've interviewed a psychologist from UCLA named Bob Moorer, who talks about the idea of, like, even when change is positive, if the change is too big, like logically, we'd say logically this change is positive. But the reptile brain kicks in, the amygdala kicks in, we have that fight or flight instinct, we have this physiological reaction, and that shuts down the higher order thought process. And so that's required for creativity or problem solving, anything that other than just escaping the moment safely. And so Professor Moore, his key is, like, the only thing you can't tell someone, don't be human, don't be scared. Like, I found a lot of change management sort of lectures people like, oh, just don't be scared. Like, yeah, well, good luck with that. Professor Moore says what you can do is make the change small. And people can become more comfortable with change. And that's part of our shared professional experience of, helping people start small with improvement in different types of workplaces.
Yeah, and that's one of the key things that I've learned in my coaching journey. And I've always heard this before, but it's a Tony Robbins quote, but it's true, is it's 80% psychology, 20% strategy. And I always say, I can give a smoker a pamphlet on exactly how to quit smoking. It's not the how-to that's stopping them. So it's all of this other stuff that helps people actually get what they really desire. Whether you make it small or you offset, change your environment, all of those things can greatly help.
Yeah, you've got to talk about motivations. I mean, there's an approach that I was exposed to years ago. I've become, at least, trying to be a student of it, an approach called motivational interviewing. Have you run across this, Brian?
I have. Some of the people that were in our clinical world used to use it.
Mm-hmm. So the one example I can think of, real quick scenario, let's say dental patient, I get told, I go in for cleanings 3 times a year because that just works better for me instead of the standard of twice a year. And I get told, you need to floss more. And that statement, while true, is something that's already in my head. This knowledge is there, but I've gotten better, but I'm not taking action on it. There's this defensiveness. It's not necessarily fight or flight. It's just equal and opposite reaction. So the motivational interviewing approach in dentistry would start off more along the lines of, hey, Mark, can we have a conversation about the health of your gums? Okay. That cleaning was kind of painful, so let's talk about this. And then they might say, Mark, tell me what you know about flossing. Then I'm articulating, I need to floss every time I brush. What are some reasons why that would be important to you? And drawing out those motivations is really powerful, instead of trying to dictate not just what you should do, but even dictating why you should do it.
There's magic in that too. Chip and Dan Heath, in their book Switch, one of my favorite quotes in there, and I've used this a lot, is people support what they create. So if you are the one who creates the action you're going to take, you are far more likely to do it than anybody saying you should. Because you go, well, all right, I know I should, but, and then, but if you created it, your chances of success are so much higher.
Yeah. Random book recommendation. This one was written by not the Heath brothers, but one of them. I'm going to Google it real quick. The book, anyway, that came out last year is called Upstream. And I think you would really like it. It's by Dan Heath.
Okay.
It's talking about, so the subtitle is The Quest to Solve Problems Before They Happen. And the fact that this book came out like a month before pandemic was on everybody's radar, it was very prescient.
Yeah.
And in terms of how can we be proactive and anticipate things that could go wrong and put prevention in place, like literally upstream, instead of just getting better at reacting. So knowing the work that you do, Brian, and again, our professional circles, I think that's a book you would really like.
It's on I'm going to add it right after we talk.
All right. So before we wrap up, and again, our guest has been Brian Buck. You can learn more about his work and his podcast/YouTube show at brianbuck.org. In a nutshell, what's your passion around helping small and medium-sized businesses? How are some of the ways you go about that?
Yeah. So I come from the corporate world, so I'm used to large organizations and helping them make improvements in not only their leadership, but also in their processes and systems. But what I find in the large organization, it's slow. And so working with small to medium-sized businesses is just more fun for me, because I get to work with smaller teams and you can actually make great changes that affect many people really quickly. And I also have a huge passion for decreasing poverty in the world. And I know by helping businesses do super well and grow in their local areas, that's one way that I can positively impact that. But yeah, I help not only help them from the leadership side, but also how do you really grow your business and how do you increase your sales, kind of help them all the way through that, kind of soup to nuts, and just help them take to the next level. Because one of my other passions is by getting a right culture when you're a small to medium-sized business, when you scale to be big, you're not going to have someone who needs to come and undo any of that kind of toxic stuff later, because there's passion and strength when the founder principles keep and grow and scale.
Yeah, that's great. It comes back again, this book, Upstream, solving problems before they happen, being upstream about designing a culture. That's a really important thing you bring up there, Brian.
Well, I didn't know the book, but yeah, that sounds like a perfect connection there. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I recommend it for the listeners and viewers as well. So again, Brian Buck has been our guest. I encourage you to go check out his show, People, Purpose, and Profits Business Coaching. I'll put a link to the episode where Brian and Kat interviewed me. I'll put a link to that in the show notes if people want to listen or watch or check that out. So Brian, hey, this has been a lot of fun. I'm glad we could not only catch up, but I'm glad we could hit record and do an episode here today. Thanks a lot.
Great. Appreciate the opportunity, Mark. Thank you.